I pick one bunch a year. I just allow myself one bunch and I move it around the house with me. It's really sad. I take it up to bed. I put it, this will come from my office to when I go and have my coffee. It's like a little companion because I think I want to get the most out of it. But you know, the first night I put these by my bed, I was quite surprised how strong the scent was. As I've got older, I think, well, maybe it's a nice thing to do, walk around the garden with nothing on. Do you know what I mean? I actually think there's probably quite a lot in that. I
can attest to the fact that it is quite nice.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to episode 106 of Talking Dirty. Over at East Ruston Old Vicarage in an emerald and navy striped jumper that makes him look a little bit leprechaun-like, we have Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
And on this cold, foggy, but now bright morning over in Cambridgeshire, we have Thordis Maria Sophia Fredrickson, who's in baby pastel pink, dare I say.
It's not a clue to gender, by the way. I have absolutely no idea. But I have just discovered it fits over bump, and any clothing that fits over bump is good news in my wardrobe.
Perfect for radio.
Yeah, perfect. We have a very special episode for you today. I'm obviously lucky enough to be based in Cambridgeshire. I regularly pop along to the Cambridge University Botanic Garden, which is famous for all manner of collections, loads of snowdrops to be enjoyed on their snowdrop trail, and fabulous mature trees. The glasshouses are really something else. And almost every day of the year when you go there, you can see some spectacular orchid in flower. And so we thought, who better to do an orchid special for us on Talking Dirty than members of the Glasshouse team at the Botanic Garden. So Luigi Leoni, I'll get your title right, Glasshouse and Nursery Team Leader. We have on one side of the sort of potting bench in the potting shed at the Botanic Garden, we also have Phil Gould with us, who is, believe me, I've interviewed him in the past, a fantastic knowledge on orchids. What is it, 40 years experience so far, Phil?
40 plus. And it gets a bit hazy for 1980.
When it comes to your orchid collection, Luigi, how many do you have, and how hard is it to get them all into flower, for starters?
I'm not sure about the precise number, but I think we have probably a few thousand accessions. And we do have different genera. And of course, there are some very reliable genera that are quite easy to bloom every year. And as Phil can confirm, there are some really, showstoppers that every year perform very well, and they're just very reliable. And then I guess there are some species that decide to bloom and then maybe die, or they're not as tamed as others.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember is that orchids come from every continent apart from Antarctica. We're talking about tropical orchids. It's a huge swathe. You've got very different climatic conditions. And so everything we do here is a compromise. We try and replicate the conditions that they have at home, but it is a challenge, and some do better than others. And when you think of a botanic garden, you think, oh, all that space, how wonderful. But it's botanic gardens, as you know, are always, we haven't got space. And in a way, the more successful we are with growing orchids, we divide them up. We then have, from one plant, we have 2 or 3 plants and even less space. So that's a problem. That's the problem.
Just, Alan, this so reminds me of you talking about your garden. He's got 32 acres and you've got numerous glasshouses. Ooh. And everyone thinks, therefore, you've got acres and acres to play with. But inevitably, you have the space, especially glasshouses, you fill it up.
You do. I mean, I have something that the Cambridge Botanic Garden is Cambridge University Botanic Garden, I beg your pardon, is famous for, of course, is their jade vine. And I mean, I do know that particular area in the glasshouse wing there is very, very hot compared to lots of the other greenhouses. And I'm wondering whether I've got enough heat to actually keep this thing. Somebody gave me one the other day.
Gave you one?
They raised it from seed. I hope it is what it says it is. But I tell
you what, Alan, if it's not what it says it is, I I decided to keep stum on something before this podcast. Luigi, would you like to leap in?
Yes, I was following the previous podcast that you had with Alex Summers when he was supervisor of the Glasshouse, and you had mentioned the jade vine back then, and I think there was a sort of half promise of a plant.
Yeah.
I think since then, Barbara, one of the members of the team of the Glasshouse, produced some seeds and some plants, and
Here's one we made earlier.
a plant here. We are
Hurrah!
going to share with you.
Oh, how fantastic. That's fabulous. Well,
So that is
Huge.
definitely a vine.
How big have they got to be before they flower?
I'm not sure. Our specimen is quite big, but
Yeah.
if I think of wisteria, which in a way, behaves a little bit the same, from seed, it takes about 10 years to actually bloom. So I think it will take some time.
Yeah.
No, see me out.
Well, that's a huge plant. I mean, maybe I should have done some pre-prep. I wanted it to be a surprise. Who would have thought that someone would give you a random jade vine seedling?
You've got some very good friends, Alan.
Yeah.
Well, this guy imported the seed from California, and I don't think he expected it to germinate. And of course, he got this plant, and it suddenly started clambering up his bathroom blind and didn't know what to do with it. And I think he rather panicked. So when we had our snowdrop day, he turned up with it and said, "Hi, I'm David. I've got a jade vine in the car for you." But it's very, very small. It's nothing like the one that you've got there, Luigi. I mean, it is just a baby.
Yeah.
I killed mine without any difficulty at all. But they do need a lot of heat.
Phil, did you ever know Morris Mason?
Oh, yes, VMH.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I was just going to say that he had a glass house in his Talbot Manor where he lived in near King's Lynn. And it's the first time I ever really sort of showed any interest in an orchid. In fact, I didn't really know anything about them at all. I was about 19 years old, and I went into this orchid house, and there was a particular orchid there. I can't even remember the name of it, but it was mottled, sort of kind of almost like dried blood and cream coloured flowers, and it smelt of vanilla.
Oh, I wonder if that's a Celia.
Celia Bella.
Celia Bella. This is Italian, you see. It sounds much better than Italian.
Celia Bella. Lovely, yeah.
Puccini.
All right. I'll tell you what, let's have a deal here. We'll all shut up and Luigi, you talk and we'll just listen.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all right. I mean, I've been in this position for less than a year, and there is definitely a lot that I'm learning with Phil about the orchid collection. So I'm really happy.
Phil will tell you, Luigi, that you never stop learning ever.
No.
Absolutely.
No.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I still have imposter syndrome. I'm trying to shake it off.
Well, for somebody that's been growing orchids, I would just like to know, you must have one particular plant that you regard as your triumph. It's something that you've succeeded at that perhaps not many other people have.
At home, with my collection at home. That's a very good question, and one I wasn't expecting.
Put you on the spot.
No, I'm going to dodge that altogether by saying, because people always say, "What's your favorite orchid?" which is not the question you asked me, which is what politicians do. They answer a different question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I'm not going to answer your question, but by saying that my favorite orchid is the one I've rescued, that looks as if it's going to die, and it's come back and it's doing well.
I think that's a fair enough answer, because people say to me, "What is your favorite part of the garden?" And it happens to be where I'm working, because that's what I'm focused on.
Exactly. Christopher Lloyd used to be asked that question. He said, "What's your favorite plant?" He said, "The one I'm looking at."
Yeah.
Which neatly gets around stupid question. You know. Expletives deleted.
Yeah.
Rarity is quite a complex issue, because are they rare because there are not many in the wild? Are they rare because they're difficult to access? Are they rare because they're difficult to grow? Do you have the right people to know to get hold of it? But I will say, about 3 or 4 years ago, the RHS Orchid Committee came up here, and all the gods were there. It was like a who's who of orchids, and I showed them around, and I put some orchids out hoping to impress. And one, which was a very prepossessing orchid called a Polystachya, which, by the way, is only one of two genera which are pan-tropical all over the world, all over the tropics, and had really very uninspiring flowers. And he stopped and said, "Oh, that's interesting." I said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yes, I was the first to describe that. It's from Madagascar, from Mount something or other with an unpronounceable name." And he said, "I don't think that's growing anywhere else in the country." So there you are. So you never know.
So you did the right thing. That was the right plant to get out to impress.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. Well, my new best friend.
And certainly when I've been to the Botanic Garden, you're kind of described as the man who will coax non-flowering orchids into bloom. So, I mean, how common is it that there's one that you come across that hasn't been playing ball, and how difficult is it for you, with all of your years of expertise, to figure out what needs to happen to make it happy?
The trouble with that is that you do something and it works, and you think, well, that's why, or you change something and it works, and then it blooms. You say, well, that's why, but there's not, perhaps it's just because maybe the climatic conditions outside had changed. Maybe the cold snap had, that's a good way to getting orchids to reflower or reluctantly flower, is by dropping the temperature a few degrees. That's what the Dutch do with all their Phalaenopsis, which they grow by the tens and tens of thousands.
Zillions.
Yeah.
Millions, yeah. I once heard that, sorry, am I rabbiting on? Just stop me, to kick me under the table. I heard there was a glasshouse in Holland, which was a mile long and about half a mile wide, with 3 employees. All the rest was done by robots.
Well,
Extraordinary.
And that is how there are so many Phalaenopsis in supermarkets.
Yes. My point was that they at week 7 or week 11 they dropped the temperature, so that on week 24 the first bud is about to open, and they go for a Dutch auction, which is the opposite to our auctions, where it starts off high and goes low. And are you brave enough to put in a bid thinking, is it going to go lower? Well, once the auction's won, they're packed away onto a lorry and in the supermarkets the next day.
Phalaenopsis, obviously the most famous, really, the most grown orchid, the most widely on sale. If people have those and they think, do you know what, I'm pretty good with Phalaenopsis, I'd like to branch out, I want to extend my expertise and my collection, where should they go from there? What are the next sort of 2 or 3 types they should try?
I could say, based on our experience also in the Botanic Garden, and also based on my experience as a grower at home, I would say probably Cattleyas and Laelias are quite reliable genera. And in fact, Cattleyas were very much in fashion in the past. They were quite commonly grown before sort of Phalaenopsis and Dendrobium sort of flooded the market. Well, as a small anecdote, when Queen Elizabeth got married, her bouquet was made out of white Cattleyas. So they were really fashionable flowers sort of at the beginning of the 1900s. And they are very easy to grow. They come from the dry forests of South America. And they have these sort of thick, flashy roots in a similar way in which Phalaenopsis sort of do. And there is a sign of an orchid that potentially is able to withstand drought. And the other sign is also the thick leaves. So they're quite thick, leathery leaves, very hard. You just look at it and you, in a way, see that they can withstand drought and sort of less care than other sort of more delicate or humid requiring orchids.
What I would say, I've spent years trying to persuade people to grow other orchids other than Phalaenopsis.
good.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because they want something they recognize as an orchid. And it's easy to grow and is bomb-proof. People still manage to kill them. Mainly, it's because they overwater them. They think, oh, it's tropical, I must water them. And that's what kills them. It's very difficult to kill a Phalaenopsis, but people find a way.
Yes. And if it can be of any
They
reassurance.
drown it, Phil.
Yeah.
I mean, if it can be of any reassurance, I'm reading this very interesting book that talks about the social history of orchids. Even the first Europeans that came about tropical orchids, they spent nearly 60, 70 years killing them. They couldn't really understand how to grow them. It took them a very long time to actually, in a way, crack the code and understand how to do it. And not because it's difficult, it's just that at the time they had great misconceptions about how to grow orchids.
How easy are Vanda orchids to grow?
They're not really suitable for the home. They need a lot of everything. They need a lot of heat, they need a lot of light, a lot of humidity, and a lot of feed. If they're not in a glasshouse, that can be quite tricky.
Yeah.
However, having said that, the cultivars, the hybrids that come out now, which you can buy at the supermarket, one way of doing it is, they have a lot of aerial roots.
Yeah, well, I've seen them pinned to a piece of bark.
Yes, that's difficult.
Yes.
Either you soak them every day and ruin your carpet. Or if you're a sad orchid grower living by himself, well, that's all right. But one way of doing it is putting them in a long vase.
Yeah.
With all the aerial roots stuffed inside.
Yeah.
Put it with rainwater. Hopefully, you can get rainwater, and let the roots soak. And you can tell when they're really soaked, they go green. Then you take the orchid out of the vase, empty the water, because you don't want the roots sitting in water. And there you have a microclimate, a very humid. Put them on a bright position, and they will flower. But Vanda species, I think they're different. I wouldn't recommend them to be grown at home.
Right.
Trying them in a pot. We recently made a purchase, Phil and I together, and I'm trying to grow some Vandas at home in pot, but it's a bit of an experiment. So I'm trying to grow them a little bit like Phalaenopsis, so in bark, in a plastic pot, transparent.
Is it clear pot?
Yes.
So the light gets to
what
the
the
root.
roots are doing as well, which I think is important. Basically, orchid roots, I think as Phil was saying before, they are green, which means they are sort of wet and humid, and they have, they can photosynthesize.
Yeah.
And then when they actually become sort of whitish, when it's time to water them again. So the transparent pots really help because you can see what the roots are doing and how much.
I've got a couple of experts sitting here in front of me. Thordis, would you mind if I ask a question?
Go for it.
It concerns a Dendrobium, which I was given. And I went to see this old gentleman, and he said to me, would you like one of these orchids? And I said, well, they look very nice. He got this thing, and it was trailing all along the top of the curtain poles and everything in his house, and it was blooming. And I said, well, what do I plant it in? He said, rubbish. I said, I beg your pardon, what do you mean? He said, rubbish, they'll grow in anything. And I take it to mean that the compost is not important to it. And it has masses of these roots. And you just saying, Luigi, that the roots were white, and you, Phil, said green, and so on and so forth. Green is when they're hydrated. I have this Dendrobium. It's sitting in a pot of rubbish. I water it occasionally. The water goes straight the way through. It has masses of aerial roots, all of which are white. Now, am I not making those wet enough?
It all depends the time of the year.
There's no flowers either.
No, it's a bit tricky because there are different types of Dendrobiums. Who said life was easy? But they like bright light. And as with all orchids, they like a wet, dry cycle. Soak them and let them dry out. You can. Are they growing on a windowsill?
No, they're growing in my orangery, which has got they wouldn't probably get any sunlight at all, but they're in bright light and they've got overhead light. Well,
that's perfect. I think the only thing that you have to watch is if the atmosphere is too dry. So to spray them regularly, spray the aerial roots. If you're growing orchids in the home, you have one advantage over people who have orchid, glass houses. is that you can change the position of the plants from season to season. For instance, in the summer, you want to avoid direct sunlight, so you might put them on an east or west windowsill. And in the winter, when they want as much light as possible in our benighted North Hemisphere winters, you can put them on the south-facing windowsill. So you actually have an advantage to whiz them around. I don't know if I've answered your question, but the important thing is that what you said, that they're growing a load of rubbish, is that it's well-draining rubbish.
Oh, the water just goes straight through it.
That's exactly what they want. They want to be soaked and dry out, which is really what we're saying about wet-dry cycle.
I think from what you've said so far in this conversation is that the aerial roots are not becoming hydrated enough.
Yes.
I need to spray.
Yes, indeed. And as I said, with anything that produces aerial roots, they need to be sprayed regularly in the summertime.
Yeah.
I think in a home environment, or even glasshouse, which in a way looks like a sort of orangery type of environment, so quite dry, sort of Mediterranean, I think it's a challenge to grow orchids epiphytically, so which means on a bark.
Then I shall take your challenge, sir.
Let us know how you get on. And show us the flowers, and I want full credit for all the
Well, he's the man who gets the reluctant orchids to flower, so I'm sure we can.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
But seriously, what we would really like to do is to encourage people to grow species to grow orchids other than Phalaenopsis and Cymbidiums, because it's possible, and we can give it recommendations of which ones to grow. Our good friends at Spisotics Orchids, they will advise you which orchids are going to be best for your environment.
Right.
And there are really lots, and the excitement when you actually flower something for the first time. I cannot believe I've done this. People say that about Phalaenopsis. It's flowering. It's flowering. Yes.
I said it about Cymbidiums.
Yeah, well, the big thing about Cymbidiums, and I've said this so many times, is that the common story about Cymbidiums is that they bought it in flower. It's been fantastic, flowered for weeks, and it's never flowered since.
Yeah.
And why is that? And it's because you're being too kind, basically. Plants want to reproduce. That's why they flower. If they're in a nice, cozy, warm house, they think, why do we need to flower? We're being well looked after here. We get watered when we need it. We get some lovely food. We'll just grow more and more leaves. Yeah. So the thing to do with Cymbidiums is to, as with a lot of orchids, which is another thing I wanted to say, is that if you put them outside in the summer, after the danger of frosts, like whenever that is, end of May, stick them under an apple tree, make sure they're well watered if it's a dry spell, keep them out of direct sun. They've got all the air circulation they need. They've got brightness. And then at the end of September, when the sort of autumn's looming, you'll bring them back in again.
I suppose if you put it outside and it's getting those temperature fluctuations much more than it would in the house, does that sort of tie in with that temperature drop?
That's exactly right. And what they need is a diurnal temperature change, which is something that's difficult to do in the house. Houses are very dry, comfortable, which is great for humans if you can afford the heating. But with orchids, they need that drop in temperature. But Spisotics are brilliant. Luigi hasn't been there yet. He's absolutely furious, jealous. They're just down the road from me. In the old days, a lot of orchid nurseries used to be, well, there used to be a lot more, but they're all in the West Country. So I used to travel for hours and hours and hours to get there. I've got one just 25 minutes down the road. It's fantastic. Go there. They tea and cake when we arrive. And it's brilliant. But they will advise you, and they're good. They have an extraordinary collection of from all over the world, the tropical ones. So I would advise you to do that.
I think that's important, though, if people want to grow orchids, is to get that advice, because you do occasionally see in some garden centres, some farm shops even, the occasional orchid. And I'm thinking probably something like a Miltonia, the pansy flowered orchid. And, you know, it has a generic label that comes from wherever it's produced. It tells you absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
You know, it's that, oh, yeah, it makes me
The
cross.
problem with that, Alan, is that people get discouraged. They think, "Oh, I'll try this Miltonia," and they're not the easiest.
No.
They got soft leaves.
I know, I've tried. I fell for it, Phil.
Yeah. They probably saw you coming in the shop and they thought,
Yeah, go on, get that tray of Miltonias out.
Yeah.
I think probably by the end of this whole episode, we're going to be drowning in FLOMO, in that sort of fear of missing out about plants, because you have brought a few from the collection to show and tell.
Yeah.
So I think lurking off camera, you have one or two specimens. What did you want to show us first? Really get Alan drooling at East Ruston.
What can you see?
Oh, look. Oh, they're behind you.
Yeah,
It's like pantomime.
Pantomime orchids.
Is it possible to pick it up? Can you loom
Yes,
it
of
into
course.
the camera so that we can get up close and personal
Good
with the
idea.
Cymbidium? It's a big old
Yeah,
plant.
good.
The flowers are kind of quite limey.
Yes, they are. I mean, we have quite a few cultivars in the garden because, of course, we use them quite a lot during this time of the year. They are so cheerful and they just brighten up the glasshouse. If you come into the glasshouse, you will just see loads of different cymbidiums of different colors, from as you were saying, lime green to pink, mauve, and it's very colorful. They really lift up, a bit like galanthus and crocuses. You know, they just lift up the display at this time of the year.
And they're reliable
Yes.
bloomers, if not
Yeah.
bloomers.
We like reliable bloomers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I know that one of the things I found quite surprising when I've come along is some of them, I mean, like Alan mentioned earlier, vanilla scents. Some of them are very citrusy. How many of the ones you grow end up being scented? Is that a lot of orchids, or is it just a few?
I think we do have quite an array of scents. I mean, you mentioned the nice ones like vanilla, but actually we also have some very smelly ones. And cymbidiums are a bit of a mixed, like there are some species that we have, like iridioides.
Tracyanum.
That they're very sweetly scented. So very reliable, like all cymbidium cultivars, but also very scented. And this is the nice thing also about going to a nursery that is focused on orchids. You can actually find loads of interesting orchids that you wouldn't find in a shop.
With different forms, with different shapes and forms, which you wouldn't recognize as being an orchid. It so happens.
Yay!
This is an Angraecum, which is the same genus as Darwin's orchid. Angraecum sesquipedale, you know the story of Darwin's orchid?
No.
Well, Darwin is a special association with the Botanic Gardens here, and he got a flower. I don't know, would it have been a pressed flower or whatever? I don't know.
I think it was a specimen blooming in the UK, if I'm correct. And he looked at the spur, and based on his theory of evolution, he thought, okay, that spur must be fitting the proboscis of a moth. So it was a very long spur, probably this length.
Well, sesquipedale, as all Latin scholars know, means 1.5 feet. But
That's not.
as with most men, they're always. And it's not quite that, but he did work. He posited. I think that's the first time I used that word on here. That there would be a pollinator, a hawk moth, because it's night scented, with the proboscis equal to the length, so it could get right to the bottom of this spur where all the nectary is. And everybody poo-pooed this. And 40 years later, I think after his death, this moth was discovered.
Yes.
A hawk moth with a proboscis which goes out like those Christmas
party horn.
Yeah, actually unrolls. And if you trawl through YouTube, there is film of this crazy American botanist who's sat in the jungles of Madagascar for possibly weeks with a night vision camera waiting for this moth. And he finally got it on camera. It's the most fantastic sight. So Darwin was vindicated. Yeah, it's a nice story. And we have a large plant of Angraecum sesquipedale, which at the moment has got 3 flower spikes.
Yes,
So we're
coming into bloom.
in the next couple of weeks, as long as the cockroaches don't get it first.
And so this one you've got for show and tell is related.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same genus. And if you look carefully, it's got a little spur. Can you see? I don't know if you can see it.
Yes, to be. Let's use your fleece as a background. So there is the spur.
Oh, there's the spur. Yeah.
So
this is where the petals are, and there is the spur. And of course, this is a very small specimen. Sesquipedale is much bigger.
Orchid stories are great. They have these backstories. And in the golden years of orchid mania in the late 19th century, these rich people sent their orchid hunters out to bring back the latest sensation and increase not only their wealth, but their reputation. And these poor collectors sometimes disappeared without trace, dying of disease or occasionally being murdered by rival collectors. So it's an extraordinary story.
Yes, there is a story of an auction. Basically, at a certain point, the price of orchids was becoming so high also because of the stories that the orchids came with. And I think there was this orchid that was auctioned growing on a skull just to sort of portray this idea of murder and danger that was coming from the jungles. And also, I think, as Phil was saying, loads of plants were raided in the forest, also because they actually didn't know that orchids had tiny seeds that could be reproduced. Like when they looked at the seeds of orchids, they are really dust-like.
Yeah.
They're so small. They thought it was just dust. They actually hadn't recognized them as proper seeds. So, yeah.
Fortunately now, if you go to see an orchid in the wild, hopefully less risk of another orchid person murdering you. But I don't know if you've both been to see orchids in the wild, but I feel like when I've spoken to you, Phil, you have gone off to experience them in their natural habitat in situ, which must be extraordinary.
So I've been to Thailand twice on orchid tours run by an English guy who has lived out there for a long time, speaks appalling Thai, and with a Manchester accent, I think. And it's very important because he gets all the permits, knows all the rangers in the protected areas, and knows when and where to find the orchids. It's no good going there and thinking you're going to find epiphytic orchids growing in the wild. You'd be very, very lucky, because you've got to be there at the right time, in the right place, know where to look, which is usually about 20 meters up a tree, because they're literally, you see a glint of yellow or something, and the challenge is to identify it from. That's why if you see a photograph of an orchid tour, everyone's going and bashing into things and tripping up. But yeah, that's if you're interested in that, and of course you learn a lot of how they grow.
Talking of which, and I don't want to forget to mention it, because if people are watching this when it goes out into the world, they still have time to book onto your orchid course, which is mid-March, I think.
Yes, 14th of March, if I'm correct. Yes, there will be a one day from 10 until 4 course on understanding orchids. So this year will be only me, but hopefully next year will be Phil and I giving this course on basically how to grow orchids, a bit the social history of orchids, and what actually makes an orchid. What distinguishes orchids from other plants, and yeah, this is the course about.
Yeah. So head to the Botanic Garden website. I mean, there are loads of courses. There are all kinds of botany and every kind of type of plant covered. So not just orchids. But if you do happen to be watching this, if you've been pronto as soon as it's published into the world, then you should still be able to book a place on that course. And if not, like you said, there's always next year. Show and tell then. Behind you, there are more beautiful things luring us in.
Shall we show this Bulbophyllum?
Yes.
Oh,
This is a Bulbophyllum, largest genus, of the orchid world, 2,000 species, pan-tropical.
And one of the biggest in nature altogether. So it's quite an impressive genus.
Some of them are foul-smelling, malodorous. But the famous one is we managed a flower which caused a big stink in more ways than one. Is Bulbophyllum Phalaenopsis, which is one of the ones pollinated by carrion flies and carrion beetles, which stinks. I mean, really, it's bad.
For that reason.
Yeah, exactly. They think it's Egon
Nectar.
Tone, it's
and more just than that, the flower itself it's so clever how plants do this. I mean, it looks almost like it's got little maggots on it.
yes, and it looks like it's got the color and of rotting meat, which is and they're nearly always red or degrees of red. And it's also a place for them to lay their eggs. And all the stink means something to them, Valentine's Day equivalent, I suppose. For smelly Bulbophyllums. Anyway, this is another Bulbophyllum. Now, I don't know if it
Doesn't really show, I guess, in camera.
it's the most delicious thing. It's Bulbophyllum saltatorium variety, something or other, or it's on the label, isn't it?
Albociliatum, I think.
Yeah. And it's got, every orchid has, one of the characteristics of orchid is its lip, which is one of the petals, generally down the bottom of the plant, which is either increased in size or different color, different shape. And it's to send a message out to the pollinators, come and get me, boys. And with this one, it's just so delicious. And unlike Bulbophyllums, it flowers and flowers for a long, it's not even flowered for a couple of months now.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I think this is the one I saw, and I think I've sent a photo to Alan. So Bulbophyllum saltatorium, something
That's
like
it.
that.
Yeah.
And it's like someone's attached a tiny bit of pink feather boa to that.
That's right. Yeah.
Bottom lip.
This is silly because you won't be able to see this, but if you blow through it, it's fantastic. So they're all shapes and sizes. A lot of them people say, is that an orchid? Which is a fair question.
When you say the bottom lip, is attracting a particular pollinator, that little bit of feather boa, what is it luring in?
Well, I think so. You were mentioning before about the pollination of Bulbophyllum Phalaenopsis, and there is in a way quite a defined pollination system mechanism. With this one, I don't think there is a precise, I don't think we know enough to say, but there is a theory that potentially those are meant to resemble sort of hair of an animal, so of a dead carcass, which is something that also Stapeliads do. So like Stapelia gigantea, they have this furry nest that I think is meant to resemble basically a dead animal. And the fact that the labellum is meant to move, which is a characteristic of Bulbophyllums, they have this sort of unhinged labellum, is actually to attract the attention of the pollinator. So it's a movement that tries to catch the attention.
Another thing is that the scent sends out pheromones as well, which gets the male very excited, apparently.
I was just so pleased that's still in flower because
it's just coming to the end now, but it's a real winner.
Yeah. One of those. I mean, orchids do tend to stop you in your tracks. I mean, it's hard to make progress down the kind of main corridor at the Botanic Garden because there are pots of them everywhere, and you kind of want to stop and look at all of them. But I suppose you get that extraordinary element, which really, you don't see very often bits of feather boa on flowers. So. They last for a long time, those flowers. I mean, obviously one of the reasons Phalaenopsis are so popular is those fleshy flowers last for a long time, but I suppose it's not true of all of them, that some come and go much quicker.
Some of them last for a day. Unless you get here before lunch, you missed them. No, literally, which makes you think they're very confident of their pollinators. You know, and you could also say that orchids that flower for a long time are less confident. I don't know.
No, but I'd never thought about it like that, but it makes perfect sense. How disappointing though, if you've spent years trying to get something into flower and it's come and gone before you even get the chance to see it.
Yeah, well, I know orchid growers who amateurs who take their orchids home take them away on holiday with them.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
I mean, you're waiting for something to flower, especially something you never flowered before, and you're getting nearer and nearer to it opening, and also getting nearer and nearer to when you're driving down to Gatwick or whatever. And it's a terrible thing, which you know by the time they come back, they'll just have finished flowering. But this guy I know took them away with him, not abroad, but to wherever he was going.
I would do that. I couldn't take an Erythronium. Last year I had to be away for a couple of weeks, and I've been waiting all year to see Erythronium Joanna. Came back and there was a little shriveled up pink.
I know. And you never know when it's going to flower again. That's for me with orchids. You know, despite mucking around with orchids for over half a lifetime, I still get this sense of excitement and thrill. It's the nearest thing to rekindle a childlike excitement, I think. Which I think is true of all gardening as well. You know, with seed, getting something to germinate. That something was a little seed, and then it was magic.
It is. I think that's what this whole podcast is about. I think we all have this childlike joy about plants. That's why we're here. It is like magic. That's why children instinctively like gardening, because you take this, this seed, you put it in some soil, and then it can turn into anything like a sunflower. I mean, that's an oak tree. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Were there any more bits of show and tell lurking over your shoulder?
Yes.
I love that you've picked a very sort of spring-like yellow display.
Yes.
Oh, look at that.
You want to sit on Luigi's lap.
Yes.
So which is this?
This is a calanthe. Used to be called Seboldii, now it's called striata, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The thing is with these, that they're, would you say they're hardy? In a protected
sort of.
a sheltered area.
Yes, very sheltered area. Yeah.
Alex's mother grows hers in her garden. That's up in sunny Nottingham. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think Alan's just. I can feel Alan's excitement because East Ruston has such a microclimate. I can see you thinking immediately, where can I put this in the garden?
Yeah. I'm thinking my kitchen courtyard on the north side of a wall, which is very, very sheltered otherwise. I mean, it could work there, couldn't it?
I think so. I mean, I was in Norwich last weekend, and I was really impressed by just how many things they in the garden here have done very badly. Actually, in Norwich are virtually untouched by and so I think you should try it.
Well, you had -15, didn't you?
We had, I think the temperature that was recorded was -10 or 11. But I know that around Cambridge, definitely there were also -12, -13. So it was very good.
I mean, heat can work for you in interesting ways. That terrible, but the extreme heat we had last summer, some of the orchids I got at home started blooming, and I think it's because they had that blast of heat, and then it getting cooler again.
Actually, also our Dendrobium speciosum potentially could have benefited from two things. The fact that we had decided, or Phil decided to give it a cool rest, but then I was in contact with a colleague of mine from Kew Gardens, and he said that he thinks that actually might be the heat. That in a way connects to this idea that we can try to do our best to make them bloom and be happy, but then there are external factors that are beyond our control, and we cannot really do much about it.
Yeah.
It's very exciting that this is one that you could potentially have such an exotic looking plant outside in the UK in a sheltered spot, are they hard to get hold of?
I don't think so.
I know. Yes, no, I wouldn't have thought so, because I think I give it, dodging the question again. Cypripediums are like paphiopedilums, are slipper orchids. Up to about 10, 15 years ago, it was considered, well, they were very rare to see, so they cost a lot of money. But the Dutch, again, found a way to grow them, and in great quantities. And they're now, you can get them for a tenner or even less. And they're hardy. You get slipper orchids which are hardy in this country. So, that's something to look out for.
I'm sure I looked at Calanthe. I was looking for some Calanthe online, and I'm sure that there are some suppliers, nursery suppliers in the UK. I don't remember names, unfortunately. It's been a long time ago, but I'm sure that there are. Probably if you look in sort of nurseries around Cornwall, probably, is also where you can probably find these kind of producers.
I think Alan's looking instantly.
And I think it's lightly scented as well. Am I correct, Phil?
Yes.
Yes, it is. So
I like the synchronized sniff.
Yes, it's a new Olympic event, synchronized sniffing. Should we talk quickly about the Myrmecophila?
Yes.
So
this goes out.
He's my gopher.
Cool. This is a big boy.
Yes.
This is sorry, go on.
This is not even the biggest I think you can get.
Yeah.
You can definitely get bigger than this.
This is Myrmecophila typicinis from South America. It has a flower spike, not this one, but we have got some in flower spikes that go up to about 6 feet.
Oh,
with big, blousy, come and get me flowers.
Yes.
So exciting. So over the top.
Yes. Look out for them in the Glasshouse.
Yes. in about a month. Yeah. We got some in the ranges. And there's some others in the reserve house which we'll bring out when it's in bloom. But the interesting thing about it is that a lot of orchids have what's called pseudobulbs, which you'll like this. I cut one off. They all come in different shapes and sizes. This is a pseudobulb, which are water storage organs for when they're going through their dry season. But this chappie here has hollow pseudobulbs. Now, why would it do that? Because it lives in association with ants. Mm-hmm. And there's a little aperture down the bottom where the ants can crawl in. And it's a symbiotic relationship. The ants find shelter, keep away predators, the fierce ants, and then kindly die and provide food for the orchid,
yes,
for the plant.
So the inside, I think, of the pseudobulb almost acts as a gut system. It's very intricate and very, it has all these little channels, and literally is where the ants do their things, as Phil was saying. And I think also the ants feed on the nectar of the flowers. So the flower also provide nectar for the ants.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I thought ants and cyclamen were cool enough. Never mind living in some sort of plant stomach. I mean, that is... it's just wonderful. It's wonderful. And when we first see the flower spike, you've got to know where to peer down, but it comes from, you can see
from around here,
from around there or there. And I've got an eye, sort of a loop. I think, yes, there's one there. The trouble is you can always persuade yourself of something which you want it to be. But
this is what we do usually. Like sometimes we go around the orchid collection in the reserves and we look at a plant and then we start sort of trying to poke the plant to see if there's a flower, and then we start sort of doing wishful thinking of, okay, let's hope there is a flower, let's hope there is a flower. There will be a flower, yes, there will be a flower.
It's such a letdown. You fool.
And you mentioned this kind of hokey cokey of moving things in the collection around. I mean, it's not just the orchids, obviously the alpine house, you'll be moving things in and out as they come into season, but with that many orchids, it's actually quite important to figure out what's about to flower, what are we going to replace this one that's going over with. I mean, it's a whole aspect of running a botanic garden people don't even think about.
Yeah, for myself, I think it's important for the public to see the orchids, because we're not a museum. You know, it'd be silly saying we've got some fantastic orchids. Oh no, you won't be able to see them because they're just for us. So that I spend most of my time at this time of year swapping orchids around, because in the spring then you come to repotting and dividing, chopping up orchids for propagation, all sorts of stuff. But at the moment it's just getting them out there.
And is that chopping up, is that dividing harder with some than others, or is it a relatively, I've never done this to an orchid, I don't know if it's difficult.
With ones with pseudobulbs and with the rhizomes, it's very, very easy. It really is very easy. It's like dividing an iris, a clump of iris. And they're so tough, I've actually on occasion got 2 forks. And, yeah, they're fine. They're fine. We've got one coming in, it's in flower spike now, called a Neo Maria. Is it Wallisii?
Yeah, Wallisii.
Wallisii.
Yes.
It's got these fantastic orange blooms, which we got from Amsterdam Botanic Garden. I think it was the only orchid they had. It was extraordinary. And we set about dividing this. It was quite a big plant, but we did it just with brute strength and took our bit home. And it's just grown into a massive plant now, which is fantastic. Fantastic. So that ought to be in flower in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yes, I guess
They've
so.
got, I think it's got 5 flower spikes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's already in the display. So again, come and look.
And it was called Neo Maria. It's for real nerds. Because Maria, as you know, is in the iris family.
Yes.
Yeah. And so Neo means new. So they just put Neo in front of it, not to confuse people. There's enough confusion.
Basically, it looks like a Maria.
Well, actually it does. I mean, I'm not sure it does, in the sense that the leaves are very different. Because like Neo Maria has these leaves that actually look a bit, as we were saying a few days ago, they look like palm leaves.
Yes.
So they are actually very different from a Moria,
Yeah.
which has more like stripy iris-like leaves. So I'm not sure why it's association with Moria, but
No, I don't know. But the leaves are so fantastic. For the leaves alone, it would be enough.
yes.
So it's very, very handsome, and these fantastic flowers.
I can only imagine what Alan's FLOMO was getting like over all of these plants. Have you any more show and tell before we FLOMO it up? I don't want to leave anything out.
The Laelia.
These are such colossal plants. They're just so beefy.
Well, these are all divisions. Started off as divisions. You know, I chopped them up, you know, and pot them off separately, and they just romp away. This is Laelia anceps, ANCEPS, from Mexico. This is a particular variety called Veitchii, which has slightly different lip color. Here you can see what I was saying about the lip. It's quite obvious.
Yeah.
That this is the different from the other segments, and will do really, really well as a houseplant. It's a cool grower, but it will accept warmer temperatures as well in the winter, and it always flowers. You can't stop it flowering, and I would recommend this. And what else can we recommend as houseplants? I think the Coelogenes.
Yes.
Coelogenes are a large family, 200 species from Southeast Asia. Soft leaves, so you keep them away from sun. They like humidity, like being wet, but they do well as houseplants.
There will be a plant list. I'm looking forward to smelling them all.
Yeah. No, really, it's a large family, and they would do well as plants. One other thing as house plants, keep them away from radiators. You know, hot, dry, they do not like. It's hardly an orchid which would which would like that.
Mm.
But as a house plant, I think they do really well.
Yes, I think Cristata and Nitida, we were saying, are probably the species that, I mean, Cristata for sure, in my experience. Nitida, I never tried it, but I think they would both perform very well in a house
Cristata
environment.
is found in the Himalayas, and sometimes it's covered in snow from the winter. So that's tropical, because people expect tropical to mean hot, steamy jungles. Well, that's true of lowland species, which largely you don't see because they're difficult to grow, except in botanic gardens, I'm sorry. If you find out where the plant grows naturally, if it grows 5,000 meters up, you've got a clue as to what kind of conditions it would like. Bathrooms are really good for growing orchids in. Lots of humidity generally, not generally too bright.
No.
So there's a lot to be done in a bathroom. I saw on YouTube the other day, someone had bought a shower unit and
For orchids.
for orchids. Perfect. And he had some contraption having it was crazy.
It's something actually I wanted to bring up when Alan and I went to the Chelsea Flower Show one year recently, and I can't remember if it was the September one or the spring one, the May one, but there was these amazing mega terrariums, big cases where they were simulating particular conditions. They're obviously very expensive, but with more and more of these terrariums becoming fashionable, I just wondered if they kind of opened up a whole world of orchids that people might be able to grow, because you are creating such a microclimate.
Yes, and it's a cheap. When I say cheap, it's cheaper. And you get there are lots, and Luigi loves the miniatures, especially. Well, so do I, but I think you especially like them. Perfect for terrariums. And they're brilliant.
There are some amazing miniatures.
You can make terrariums out of virtually anything. Some people just get plastic bottles and chop a bit off and have it. Yeah, it doesn't have to be expensive or look nice.
Jars as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jars. And I guess, as you were telling me, it can sort of get out of hand. If you look at a jar at a certain point, you just start thinking, oh, that could be a terrarium, rather than actually putting jam or other things.
Who needs jam? So, Luigi, are there any particular miniatures that you would like to highlight?
Well, so I think probably what I like, so there are very few, there are quite a lot of species, but what I like in particular is Phalaenopsis lowiae, which is very tiny species. It's not a jewel orchid, which is probably the group of orchids which is more famous for terrariums. This is a slightly different one. It grows epiphytically and it produces flowers, which are very tiny Phalaenopsis flower.
Bulbophyllums would be good.
Yes, as well.
You get some bulbophyllums are very small, and you can contain the smell. But again, at Spisotics, they have dozens of miniature orchids, which are just so sweet, so lovely. Schoenorchis.
Yes.
Schoenorchis fragrans. Oh, hello.
Oh,
Gigi's come to join us.
Yes, she has.
Sweet.
Funnily
She
enough,
was disturbed by somebody at the door, you see.
Funnily enough, my little pooch just turned up as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh.
Oh, lovely. Oh, sweet.
She said, I just wanted a tickle. Actually, I'm off.
Yeah.
I think, miniatures, I assume that in the same way that lots of houseplants have captured a younger audience, miniatures perhaps are helping to attract maybe a younger generation into, well, gardening full stop, but also kind of orchid care, hopefully, excitingly.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. There's so many to choose from.
Well, it does actually bring certainly me round to FLOMO, this idea of this sort of floral plant that's giving you a fear of missing out, because you just mentioned jewel orchids. And whenever I find myself in a houseplant shop, there's always some absolutely beautiful jewel orchid leaf there, normally priced at about £26. And I just think, I'm going to kill it. I can't possibly bring that home and tell the other half I've spent £26 on 2 leaves that are probably about to shrivel up and die. So how easy are they to make a success of?
I don't think they're easy, to be honest with you. They're forest floor dwellers, so they don't like a lot of light. They have a lot of humidity. They grow in rubbish, as Alan says. There's one which is easy, which you can get at any supermarket, which is Ludicea discolor, which is very beautiful. A lot of the jewel orchids have, obviously they do flower. The flowers are not spectacular, are not grown for that reason. However, they grow well in terrariums. You put them in out of the direct sun. We've got some growing at home, which are fantastic. But the thing is, if you recommend things to people who are not experienced with with orchids,
or iris,
and they kill them. Sorry.
Or iris.
Oh, iris, yes. And they kill them, they get discouraged. What we don't want to do is to get to almost fulfill their low expectations of how difficult orchids are.
Yeah.
So I would recommend the ones that you're not going to kill. They're easy to flower. But I wouldn't start off with a jewel orchid, quite frankly, unless you knew what you were doing. But with terrariums, again, as long as you leave them alone and give them occasional spray, maybe a bit more spray in the summer, and congregate them around each other, because they benefit from being close in a colony, because they get humidity, or maintain the humidity around the plant.
It's worth saying that with houseplants, full stop, actually. If you've got houseplants that want humidity, grouping them is a way of creating that. Yes. And, Alan's always saying plants are sociable creatures. They want to be together.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other advantage of growing them as houseplants is you get less pests and diseases, which you can control more easily. And also, if you have a small collection, it's a lot easier to, pick up your plants, look at them, Don't assume everything's all right. And the one at the back never gets looked at. It's exactly the same here. You think, wonder how that's doing. It's going to be so heavy. I'm going to have to move all these plants. All this is going on the subterranean level. Eventually, you think, I must have a look at that. And it's just covered in mealy bugs or whatever. And you feel terribly guilty.
Neglect. Yeah. We've all been there.
Guilt is a constant companion of orchid growers. They come back with orchids and they try and smuggle them back into the house because I don't know what it is. They always try and, just bought a couple, And you say, I'm not going to spend more than X. And then you spend X, then you see something you really want. And it's amazing what you can persuade yourself about.
Well, don't worry. Alan's just been, hoovering up the plants at the Snowdrop Fair a little while back, and we all know what snowdrops can cost. So.
Oh yeah.
How did that go?
I won't tell you how much one of his bills was. I overheard.
Some of the plants here that we've got, if you wanted to buy them from Orchid Nursery, would cost hundreds of pounds.
Yeah,
literally hundreds of pounds. Anyway,
good job you've got good security.
Exactly.
And before we move on to your FLOMO, you mentioned spraying them. What do you feed with at the Botanic Garden?
We use different type of feeds. We have one which is the basic one, ultraviolet, which has this red color, which is diluted then with water. And I would say it is a balanced fertilizer with NPK. By its very high dilution, because orchids, differently from other plants, need less nutrients. So it's a bit like feeding cacti. I think orchids and cacti sort of have a similar feeding regime. You just have a much diluted fertilizer. And then once in a while, because of our water being sort of low in nutrients, which is what orchids like rainwater. So we have once in a while also fertilizing with fertilizer that has more calcium and magnesium, which are nutrients that lack in the other fertilizer. So we sort of integrate them once in a while.
Either for those who are growing them at home, either use a specialist orchid fertilizer, which you can get at most supermarkets or Scottsdale's or wherever, or if you're using a general fertilizer, dilute it to half or even quarter, because then you're going to get build up of salts and all sorts of stuff, which they won't like.
Yeah, I'm glad I asked. Right then, you two, Luigi, Phil, where are you at with your FLOMO? Are there things on your wish list, either personally or, for the garden itself?
I think for the garden, I would like to have a Phalaenopsis gigantea.
I know you've been lusting on.
Yes, I've mentioned this one a few times.
Yeah.
Which is a Phalaenopsis species, but I actually love the genus Phalaenopsis because there are so many interesting species, and this one is quite cool because it's a massive Phalaenopsis. Like
the leaves are huge.
Yes, they can reach probably 1 meter if bigger in size, and they have this very pendulous inflorescences.
I've never seen it. Luigi.
I've seen some pictures. I've never really seen it in sort of live, because actually it's quite difficult to grow. It does hate root disturbance. You can only grow it epiphytically, which is not necessarily the easiest of things. So yeah, that is on my wish list.
Yeah, I guess for me, there's a genus called Coryanthes, popularly known as the bucket orchid, because the lip has been evolved into what looks roughly like a bucket, and the plant has 2 faucets, I think they call them in America, little taps where it drips this liquid into the bucket. The male euglossine bee, which is not terribly intelligent, smells all these pheromones and falls in to this lovely gloop, stinking of pheromones, and it gets smashed out of its head and can only exit the plant through these little steps in the lip, as it slowly dries out and get further and further. And the only way you can get out of the plant is over the stigmatic surface of the flower. That's just brilliant. Anyway, we've got one, which is now 2, divided, Coryanthes macrantha. These are from South America. The scent is amazing, absolutely amazing, and not often seen. And we've managed to persuade ours into flower where others have not, but we don't boast about that at all. So yeah, I'd love more species of that. Yeah.
Wow.
Because I don't know how many species there are, maybe 25.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but they are amazing. And
I remember seeing it when I was a trainee about 5 years ago, and we had a specimen blooming in tropical wetlands, and it was just incredible. As Phil was saying, it just looks like a bucket with sort of wings, suspended in the air. It's just incredible. Really incredible.
Look it up.
Yeah,
it's fantastic flower. Yes, I'd get very excited if we got more species.
Well, I'm just looking at pictures of Phalaenopsis gigantea, and I mean, so impressive.
Yes,
just huge.
Alan is a big fan of size.
Who isn't?
Size is everything.
Oh, thanks, Luigi.
So Alan, where are you at then after all of these different plants, from ones that might even be hardy enough to be outside to some which are significantly sizable? I'm
definitely going to try Calanthes striata, because I mean I've just looked it up, and Edrom nurseries have it, Quebec plants have it. I'm definitely going to find out about Bisotics, because that is just really intrigued me. I mean, I just wish I had more knowledge on some of these wonderful orchids that you've talked about. I have to say I'm not terribly fond of Phalaenopsis as a genus, because, well, I say as a genus, that's wrong. Because I've been flooded with everything that you see in Marks and Spencer's and goodness knows where else. And, they I think they've become ubiquitous, haven't they? Really?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
and because if I would want to encourage people to do this, but the other thing about they're cheap,
Yes.
and
Yes.
if you kill them, you just go out and buy another one.
Well, when it finishes, people throw them away. When it finishes
Yeah,
flowering,
yes.
I mean, they use it as a, you get another one.
Yeah, and you can't see anybody on the TV in an office or in a sitcom or in a drama where there's a white Phalaenopsis on the windowsill. But I have to say that on behalf of Luigi, that Phalaenopsis species knock the spots out of any cultivar, blousy cultivar.
Yeah.
Any species.
I would suggest also, which are amongst my favorite, Schilleriana and Stewartiana, because they have marmorated leaves. If you show a picture they're just incredible, and they're just worth growing for the leaves, not for the flowers, but for the leaves. And we can say that generally you grow orchids for the flowers, not for the leaves. But these ones are also for the leaves, because the leaves are just as incredible.
I can see that. I'm going to have to come to the Cambridge Botanic Garden and have a look.
Well, we're planning a visit just for our own selves. So I'm sure you'll see us peering into orchid flowers at some point in the not too distant future. This has been as mind-blowing, as inspiring as I thought. I like Alan, I mean, he's got a lot more knowledge than me, but I just hope one day I can have acquired just a smidgen of the knowledge that you guys have about orchids. They are astonishing. They are amazing. I can see, Phil, how you've dedicated half a lifetime to them and get excited about them because they're amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I've been sitting here, and I mean, you Phil, I think you said, the other half is churning away in here. My other half has been churning away in here, and that is, I'm currently mucking out a greenhouse. It's a lean-to on a wall. It's frost-free, but it has this intriguing. It's got a brick base, so it has this intriguing area underneath the staging, and I'm sort of visualizing that either hanging from the staging or underneath the staging, I could have the beginnings of an interesting orchid collection, perhaps. Meanwhile, I'll get to grips with.
It's a very dangerous road you're traveling there.
I know with anything, snowdrop, for instance.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
But meanwhile, I think I'm going to get to grips with my Dendrobium, and actually, I mean, it's growing well. It's producing lots of leaves and stuff, and I need to get those roots hydrated, I think.
Well, yeah. I mean, send a picture over. We'll try and identify it, and I'll be interested to see, how it does.
Yeah.
So will Alan.
Well, you've inspired me, I have to say, and I think it's people like you, people like me, where our gardens we're on show, we're open to the public, and I don't think it's just for us that we want to grow these wonderful things and preserve them and keep them going. It is for people to see and for people to share.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
I agree.
And also some of the things we grow here are probably extinct in the wild.
Yeah.
So
that's
it's
more
responsibility
special
as well. Yeah.
And if Cambridge University Botanic Garden isn't local to you, I am extremely lucky that it's local to me. Then obviously there are generally, hopefully, not too far away, a botanic garden. They won't have Phil, so they might not have quite as many orchids in flower, but but certainly plenty of interesting things to see. So go support your
If
local
anybody's
botanic
listening
garden.
to this podcast and they're in Norfolk, in Norfolk, I would say, because you've got. All you've got is you've got a train station that goes straight to Cambridge. It takes an hour. You've got a 10-minute walk, and you're in heaven.
Yeah. It's right there. It's literally down the road from Cambridge Central train station.
Yeah,
Don't get off at
especially-
Cambridge North. That is a no man's land no one wants to go
I've
to.
heard bad things about that. Some people have never been seen again.
Definitely go for Cambridge Central. But yeah, if you can get the train, it's very easy by train. So you can just
And
pop along.
also, there'll be orchids out every day of the year. And in fact, probably midsummer is the least, they're growing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, all welcome.
It has been an absolute treat. Thank you so much to both of you. Luigi,
Thank you
Phil,
so much.
you've inspired us. I think everybody watching and listening to this is going to want to grow and try at least one other different type of orchid. So thank you very much. And until next time, happy gardening.
Absolutely.
Happy gardening, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Good morning.
Hello, hello. I can hear you. I can't yet see you, but that is entirely normal.
Yeah. Hi.
Hey,
My hair's a
hello.
mess.
Well, actually, before we get into the orchids, any middle names to share?
No.
No? None?
They're not very common in Italy. So.
Is that so? I forgot what I was talking about now. I go down these, you know. No, it doesn't really work on radio. Taxonomists, the people who classify plants, are maniacs. And they confuse
Tell us
everybody.
about it.
Eh?
Tell us about it.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Why
yeah.
do they call an aster Symphio Tricum?
to impress. So, yeah, I forgot what I was saying again. What happens when you get to my age?
I'm loving this for the bloopers, though. This is great.
Yeah.